Welcome back to the best damn training channel on YouTube. Today, upper body focus day, our only upper body focus day of the week for the Summer of Speed program has always been a bench press and pull row variation type day. Now, I'm changing up this format of the week. I've been doing a lot of sprinting and lifting on the same days. And in the first 4 weeks of this program, we were just accumulating volume. We didn't have a lot of hard intensities in the weight room. We were doing sets of 8 on a lot of stuff at like 60, 65%. Now we're bumping things up to about 75%, going up towards 80% on some of these lifts over the next couple weeks. With that, I'm separating the sprint days from my lifting days. So on Monday, I only sprinted, because the intensity on that was much higher, the volume on that was much higher, and I needed to have some break in between that sprinting and the lifting to be able to maintain the quality on each of those sessions. So Tuesday was a lower body day, and you guys saw that yesterday. Wednesday is the upper body session. Now, I was supposed to do tempo runs today, but today was one of those days I woke up and was like, I just don't want to do tempos. Nothing about tempo runs sounded enticing, and it's probably something I should have done, but I just decided I didn't want to do tempos today. And you know what? It's fine if you cut out the tempos, because in terms of what I'm doing throughout the entire week, today as a whole is my least important day. So if I feel like I need to get a little bit more recovery in for the legs and get a little bit more rest so I can be more explosive for sprinting tomorrow and lifting again the next day, then this is the day that I can kind of take some things out. Now, I'm not always going to skip the tempos. There might be a day where I decide, you know what, I only want to do the tempos and I don't really feel like lifting upper body today, but that's what these days are for. This is kind of a flex day where it's like we've got work to do if we want to, but if there's some things that we need to take out, today's the day to do it, to be able to make sure that we maintain that quality. So I'm only doing the upper body session today. I'm giving my legs a little extra break, especially after taking the week off last week because of being sick, coming back sprinting and lifting. I feel like my legs don't need to be doing 1,400 meters worth of tempo runs today. So I'm throwing those out and focusing on the upper body work today. Another thing I'm doing is tomorrow will be a sprint only session. We're going to be doing a lot more max velocity focused work than we have in the previous weeks. So you guys will see that tomorrow. And then again, we're going to be doing some lower body power training. We've got cleans and box squat variations and stuff we're going to do on Friday. The format of the week has changed. The progression is more intensity and higher velocities on the track by focusing on a lot more max velocity specific sprinting. But in the weight room, we've dropped things down to doing sets of 6 on a lot of things. We're trying to move explosively. I had the VBT out yesterday, tracking some bar speeds on some movements that I'm going to do. I'm also going to throw that on the bench press today for the variation that I'm choosing to do, just kind of track that as well, just so I can get used to using that device more and more and see what those numbers are on certain movements. A couple things before we get into today's session. One, I weighed myself this morning and I was 95 kilos exactly, and that's the lightest I've been in probably 10 years since I was doing CrossFit, when I was consistently about 94 kilos when I was doing CrossFit. And that was post breakfast. So I forgot to weigh myself first thing in the morning. I went and ate breakfast and then I weighed myself and I was 95 exactly, which means I'm probably closer to that 94 kilo range, which puts me like 207 pounds, 208 pounds ish, which is like I said, the lightest I've been since I did CrossFit back in 2016. Now, with that body weight change happening, and I've been basing my percentages off of my previous most recent maxes, I don't think I'm at those most recent maxes right now, especially on the bench press, because I'm not focusing on it too much. So I'm choosing a variation that's going to allow me to hit closer to those percentages that I need to hit based off of the 1 rep max that I'm using, because I think it's a little bit inflated at the moment. So I'm doing a pin press, and what that's going to allow me to do is kind of break up that eccentric, concentric portion, focus on getting that bar down to the bottom position on those pins and trying to explode off of that pin or off of these safety arms. And that's also going to shorten up that range of motion a little bit. So I'm not going all the way down to the chest. I'm going to be above the chest and shortening up that range of motion. So essentially, you could think of this as a box squat for the bench press, or a variation similar to that. I should be around 130 kilos for my sets of 6 today. If I can be somewhere around 125, I think that'll be good. If I can go all the way up to 130, I will. But this will be my last warm-up set. Everything up until this point has felt pretty good. Yeah, and that feels good. So what I'm gonna do is I have 4 sets total I'd like to do. I'm gonna do my first set at 125. Use that as kind of like the feeler. If it feels good, we'll go up to 130. If it feels kind of sticky or it's not moving the way I would like it to move, then we'll probably just stick at 125, but that still puts me close to that 75% range that I wanna be at today. All right, so I got the velocity tracker on the barbell again. I'm gonna be tracking the velocity on each of these repetitions. So I'm gonna be looking at peak velocity for each rep on the sets here. I've got it set to 275 pounds, which is the 125 kilos that I have on the barbell right now. Knock out this first set and we'll see where we're at for peak velocity on each of these here. So if I'm gonna go off of feel first, felt heavy, moved decently well. Last few reps got a little bit slower than the first ones. If I look on the velocity here and I'm looking at peak velocity meters per second, first rep was a 171, but then the rest of the reps were like 0.7 to 0.6. So I think that first rep might be off a little bit because all the other reps are significantly lower and pretty consistent within each other. So we'll say like a 0.65 average on those. So the goal here now is I'm using the velocity tracker to try to beat 0.65 on an average for my next set. And I posted on Instagram and I also told you guys on YouTube that I'm using a velocity device. A lot of people had questions about how I'm going to be using velocity tracking to dictate my training. And I don't know if I'm going to be specifically programming load based off of the velocities I see. I touched on this a little bit yesterday when I was talking about the velocity tracking. Is the first thing I've noticed is that it creates competition. Now I have a number to beat rather than just counting 6 repetitions with no velocity on it and just trying to go off of how it feels. I have an actual specific number that I'm gonna try to beat. So right off the bat, intent of each of these sets should raise, which for me, that's plenty when I'm looking at tracking velocity. I'm looking at seeing if there's any peaks and valleys anywhere. If there's a significant drop off, let's say when I get closer to my last few sets, then I'll make a decision if it's worth kind of grinding through these reps and making these a lot slower just to get the sets and reps done, or do I cut it off because I've seen that velocity is going down? Will that transfer over to, reaching my peak maximum recoverable volume for a specific session? Does that allow me to recover better and perform the next day? I think those are going to be the added benefits for tracking velocity versus going like, oh, you know what? I need to be in a strength area, so I need to be at 0.5 to 0.6 on all my reps on this and use that 0.5 to 0.6 to dictate the loading, all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's how I'm going to use it. I think what I'm going to do is first and foremost, compete with myself on each of these sets to try and beat myself or at least remain consistent between them, and then use it as like fatigue management. If I see a very significant drop off happening, then I might end up cutting sets or repetitions off as we get like closer to the end ranges of whatever the total working load I was going to be for the day. But that's my initial thoughts on how I'm going to be using the velocity device here. All right, so we look at set number 2 here on the velocity device, and you can see that peak velocity was slightly higher. So I got a 0.89 was my fastest one on that, but 0.67 to 0.72 was my average on that. So slightly faster than the 0.65 average if I'm looking at the peak velocity on each of those repetitions there, which is great. That's what I like to see. I knew that 0.65 was there. Now I don't know what 0.65 feels like exactly when I'm looking at doing the repetition like right then and there. I can't be like, oh, that was a 0.65 or that wasn't. But what I'm thinking about is I'm just trying to explode this bar off of these pins right now and try to get to the point where I feel like each of those reps is moving faster. And then we'll look at the device and be able to see. Now, ideally, what I would like to do is have some device be able to hold this phone up and I can see those numbers as I'm doing the repetitions, but with the bench press, it's a little bit trickier to do that. Like yesterday with the trap bar, I could put the phone on the tripod and see that and be able to track everything, which is really cool. And this, with the RDLs, I can do that. If I'm doing cleans, I can always set the phone out. But on a bench press, I don't have a way where I could set this up, hang it from the ceiling or something to be able to see those numbers as I go. 2 more sets on the bench press. We'll keep tracking the velocity, see what the peak is on each of those. And then we're gonna move on to some pull-ups. All right, third set of 6 here, and we're looking at 0.88 was the peak. Most reps, again, high 6s to low 7s. Slowest rep on that was a 0.5 on the last one. It did get kind of slow. So definitely had a little bit of a drop off there on that last rep. So now that's where I'm saying, like, if you see a significant drop in velocity, you can look at yourself here and go, okay, maybe on the next set, I only do 5 because that last rep, the quality on that repetition went down. And if you see consistent habits like that happening, you can make more informed choices on what's going to be the best overall decision when we're looking at maintaining intent on each of these sets and each of these reps. So I think what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to raise these arms up one more. So not change the load, but again, give myself a shorter range of motion to work with and see if I can mitigate that significant drop off that we saw for that last rep. Or it went down to a 0.61 and then a 0.5. So a significant drop as we're getting to those later repetitions right now. So raise these up a little bit, see if we can't keep that intensity and match the intent for the sets previous on this next one. Couple reps in there, I could already tell, felt a little bit shaky. But if we look at the averages, yeah, exactly what I thought was gonna happen, because obviously the shorter range of motion, we had like a 0.93 as our highest rep, and most of them were in the 0.8s. So 0.93 to 0.83, significantly faster on that set compared to the ones previously. The highest was a little bit higher, obviously, because we have shorter range of motion. We should be able to create a little bit more force on that bar, being in a stronger position and moving that bar more quickly. But overall, using velocity to dictate how I'm going to be doing these sets and reps, I think what you just saw right there is probably how I'm going to be using it for the most part. Is I'm not going to change load. I'm not going to let the velocity go, yo, you know what, that was too slow. Let's lighten it up so we can move faster. Let's just keep the load the same and choose a variation of that load that will help us move it faster. So on to the pull-ups. All right, so we got pull-ups next. 4 sets, and I'm just kind of repping these out. I don't really have a specific set and rep range that I want to be in. I'm just going to do 4 sets of what I feel like is a decent amount of repetitions on these, because pull-ups is something that I do pretty regularly, and I'm not too focused on doing like weighted pull-ups and making this strength movement, because I'm going to be doing some row variations after this. So all I'm really looking at doing is overhead position and getting some volume in on that. It's not going to be taking away from anything else that I'm doing. So using this as kind of like maintaining upper body volume just throughout is fine. It's not gonna, like, you do maximum sets on pull-ups, it's not going to take away from my sprinting tomorrow. It's not going to affect my recovery to a point where I feel like I can't be explosive and fast later on this week. So just rep it out, feel good about it. That's a decent amount right there. Like I said, we'll do 4 sets on that. But I did have a topic actually that just popped back in my head that I wanted to talk about in today's video. And I reposted, it was either a story or a post from Justin Leinhard, or I believe on Instagram his name is Judd Leinhard. And if I got that wrong, I apologize. But he had made a story that kind of took 2 shots at 2 different topics. One of them was zone 2 and how you can get the effects of zone 2 without having to do zone 2. And I believe he showed a picture of his heart rate as he was doing sprint drills and some running variations on some stuff, but not steady state, low intensity. And the heart rate on that showed that his average heart rate across the hour that he was doing these drills and these different running variations was a zone 2 average. And you could see that there was peaks and valleys across that. But over the course of the entire 60 minutes, his average heart rate was in zone 2. And he was arguing that you can maintain intense pieces with rest periods and still hit zone 2 requirements without having to just sit on a bike or do some easy stuff. Now, I reposted the story for the second point that he was making. And he had made a point about CrossFit and how CrossFit gets a lot of training modalities mixed up with intensity, and how CrossFitters think everything needs to be intense and everything has to be hard and everything has to be done at this maximum effort type stuff, and how they use conditioning in different ways, but a lot of times they're getting it wrong. And along with that, he was talking about how CrossFitters don't see the progress that they want to see because they do too much too often at too high of intensities. Now, I reposted that story on the CrossFit side of things, and I had written down at the bottom and said, I can't agree more with it. I never felt less athletic in my life than when I was training and competing at the CrossFit Games. And I did compete at the CrossFit Games in 2016. And me reposting that story, I wasn't backing up the zone 2 arguments. I was more backing up the CrossFit argument on that. And regardless of whatever it is specifically he was talking about, somebody had commented on my story and said, too bad he's on steroids. And I was confused about that. I was like, I don't get it. Like, what does that have to do with the topic that he's talking about? And the guy who had said, too bad he's on steroids, says, I don't listen to anybody who takes performance enhancing drugs. And that blew my mind. Like, my response was him was like, you're too focused on the messenger and you're not focused enough on the message. Regardless of performance enhancing drugs, the information that he was saying was true. And I'm talking about the CrossFit part. I'm not going to get into the zone 2 stuff because I don't give a shit. And this guy wanted to go back and forth on performance enhancing drugs and how it's morally wrong and blah, blah, blah. This guy that I was talking to briefly did mention, he goes, well, at least he's open about it and he's not a fake natty like a lot of other people. And my last response to this man was like, look, if you're not going to listen to anybody who takes performance enhancing drugs, then there is a wealth of knowledge that you're leaving on the table simply because you care more about killing the messenger than listening to the message. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is the fact that, like, I think people are too hell-bent on having this all or nothing mentality. Like, if I'm going to listen to this person or follow this person on social media, then I have to be all in on this person. And I don't believe that's true. I think if you want to follow somebody, you can disagree with people and agree with them and still become better in the long run, because you're getting information that is valid information, that's true information, that can help you progress in your training to make you see progress faster than if you were just going to go, you know what? Anybody who's ever done steroids or is on steroids, I'm going to push them off the side and I'm not going to listen to any of them. I think that is an immature mindset to have, because it takes a high level of critical thinking to be able to listen to somebody that you might disagree with, to be able to get information that might benefit yourself. Now, the all or nothing mindset is, I don't agree with this person, so anything that they say, I'm automatically going to be against. Or I do like this person and I do agree with them, so anything that this person says, I'm going to automatically agree with. That's not critical thinking. That's a very immature mindset, especially in strength and conditioning, because I think you'd be surprised the amount of people that you probably do listen to that have done steroids in their past or performance enhancing drugs or are on them currently and you just don't know about it. But you still probably listen to those people, take their information and go, you know what, this is great. I agree with this. And just having this brief conversation with this person, I eventually just ignored them because they kept wanting to go down the road of performance enhancing drugs, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I could care less about any of that. But that mindset to me is a mindset that a lot of people have, that all or nothing of I agree with this person, I'm going to agree with everything they say because I align myself with them, or I don't align with this person, so I'm not going to agree with anything they say because I don't agree with their lifestyle or anything like that. I think having the mindset of let me listen to the message, and based on my own knowledge, is there something I can take away of value? And if there's not, then I just ignore it. Like I don't take it as face value. I don't say I disagree so I hate you or I agree so I like you. I just go, nah, I don't really agree with that, or that information isn't relevant to myself and what I'm looking for in training or in life or whatever it might be. So I just had that thought pop in my head. I was blown away that this dude was like, I don't listen to anybody who's on steroids. It's like, there's so many ridiculously smart people out there who take testosterone, who take hormones, who do performance enhancing drugs. It doesn't mean that the information that they give you is invalid. But okay, enough ranting about random stuff from the internet. Let's go ahead and knock out another set of pull-ups. I'll tell you what, being a little skinny bitch makes bench press feel harder, but makes pull-ups feel much easier. All right, for today's kind of rowing variation, I'm doing a single arm cable row just because I wanted to change it up. I've been doing dumbbell rows for a while now, but also this variation allows me to kind of load this up a little bit more. The dumbbells that we have only go up to about 50 kilos, and they're starting to feel like I could use a little bit more load on that row variation. So this half kneeling row variation, although I only got 50 kilos on the bar or on the arms here, it still feels like a progression because the load feels heavier than just a 50 kilo dumbbell. So what I'm gonna be doing is also adding a little bit of body English in it. I'm not gonna be the most strict on this variation here. So I'm gonna kind of rotate as I get to my extended position and then rotate a little bit as I pull that handle towards me. And we'll do 6 reps on each side here. I think that was 6, but I'll probably add another 10 kilos. I feel like I got a little bit left in there, but I'll do 2 to 3 total reps or sets on this, and then that's gonna be it. So just 3 movements today: bench press, pull-ups, and a row variation. Because like I said, upper body days right now on the summer speed program, we're just trying to maintain as much as we can, even though the strength levels will go down because we're not focusing on it so much. Overall, today felt good. I really enjoy these upper body sessions because I can get in some work, feel like I'm doing something, allow my legs to recover, become fresh. Because tomorrow we got a fun max velocity session planned, and I'm gonna be filming that for you guys so we can see that. But that's gonna be it for today's video. I appreciate y'all for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.